clearly, swans were not of the same importance as they were in other parts of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Their soul bird, their psychopomp, as the term is used in Greek classical tradition, the soul carrier, was the vulture. This was represented in the sky originally as Cygnus. But what's so interesting is that Deneb and other stars from Cygnus had originally been the pole star from around 16,000 BC through to 13,000 BC. But for 3,000 years, they had acted as the pole star. And what I was beginning to realise is that for some reason, the megalithic people who created these first temples, the watchers of the Book of Enoch, were interested in a star which had been a pole star several thousand years before their time. It's as if they were preserving the memory of a much earlier tradition that went back to Paleolithic times, to the very era that the cave artists were drawing, Cygnus in the form of a bird on the end of a long pole within the Lascaux cave in southern France.
Yeah.
So this was beginning to make sense. Plus we know that in shamanic tradition, there is the tradition of the cosmic axis, that is said to be the turning point of the heavens that is joined to Earth, to a spot, a location known as the axis mundi, or the axis of the Earth, the turning point of the Earth, by what's known as the sky pole.
Yeah.
Now this sky pole, although a symbolic form, actually corresponds with what is known as the meridian line, the north-south meridian line. So that if you look up towards the northern heavens, if you can imagine from the exact point of true north, a line that rises up to the pole star, this was seen as the sky pole.
Yeah.
But the sky pole was also, in a secondary manner, connected with the rising and appearance of the Milky Way. And this is the other important element here, because Cygnus is positioned at the very extreme northern part of the Milky Way, where the Milky Way breaks into two and forms like this dark rift, which is actually known as the Great Rift. It's an area of dark stellar debris, gaseous matter and dust and whatever that you can visibly see in the sky, and splits the Milky Way in two. And exactly where it splits is where the stars of Cygnus, the cross-like formation of stars, which is known as the Northern Cross as well, I should have pointed that out, is actually positioned. And what we must remember that in traditions all the way around the world, whether they be shamanic or religious, the Milky Way was seen as a road or river to the stars. So we've now got two different paths to get to Cygnus. One via the Milky Way, and the other one via the so-called north-south meridian line. And both of them would take you to the exact same position. And once you start understanding this, and you understand that this cosmological idea of the sky goes back to at least 15,000 BC, maybe 16,000, you can see that we're dealing with a very, very old belief that is associated with rituals and that is found worldwide. Because after I started to realise that this was so important to the Near East, and quite obviously to Europe and Asia, I looked towards the Americas for confirmation, because as we know, according to conventional archaeology and science, there was a land bridge that linked Asia to America through until the end of the last ice age, allowing peoples to migrate across the so-called Bering Strait down into North America, and then it was cut off. And in theory, although quite clearly we all know this is not quite the case, in theory, the peoples of America were left in isolation through until, the time of discovery.
Yeah.
Conventionally, the Vikings, although we know that there's good evidence for peoples reaching there thousands of years earlier.
Exactly.
But what I felt was that if I could look towards North American tradition and find that Cygnus was also important there, then there was a very good chance that I was right in my belief that it was of Paleolithic origin.
Yeah.
And in that, exactly what I found. I found that a number of Native American tribes revered Cygnus as the place of origin of the soul where it would return in death. They referred to Cygnus as the bird foot or the turkey foot, which was a representation like a three-pronged fork, which can be formed by its stars. Indeed, this is interesting because this same representation of a bird foot is universally associated with Cygnus in various parts of the Near East and in Asia as well. But beyond this, I found that I looked at a number of the very oldest mound sites of North America and found that many of them were actually orientated towards the Milky Way at the time of the summer solstice.
Yeah.
The summer solstice sunrise would occur, but 2 hours beforehand, the Milky Way would be seen at exactly the same position where the sun would rise. And you would see it rising vertically up into the air, directly above to where Cygnus would sit. Now, I think what's important here, and some of your listeners might be saying, well, why would these people be taking so much interest in a star group?
Yeah.
And the answer to this is very plain and simple. Today, we can walk out of our houses, we can look up, and we can see a few stars. We can probably see 100 or so, maybe more.
Yeah.
But there are actually thousands of stars that are visible in the sky, and all you need to do is to go out into, the countryside, and you'll begin to perceive how important the starry sky would have been to these people in the past. Indeed. So if you then realise that in the past there was no pollution, there were no lights, there was nothing that would obscure the view of the stars at night.
Yeah.
And they take on paramount importance to religious traditions, religious beliefs, religious rituals.
Yeah, indeed.
And it, in a manner which I don't believe we fully comprehend at this time. I mean, people like Robert Bouval has done a lot to show the significance of the Orion constellation in places like Egypt.
Yeah.
And this has been very important to establish just, how strong our ancestors brought, stars and star systems into their beliefs. The Maya also saw stars and star groups as very important, and we know this.
Yeah.
However, this was a universal thing. It was not just in Egypt. It was not just in Mexico. It was all over the world.
Yeah.
And even though today the brightest star in Cygnus, Deneb, is only the 18th brightest star in the sky, the constellation as a whole and its position on the Milky Way was of crucial importance to, the ideas of the survival of the soul and of the origins of life in the cosmos.
Yeah.
Now, this is not New Age jargon or whatever. I mean, work done by Michael Ruppengluck, a professor at Munich University, has basically said everything that I'm now telling you. He was the guy that established that Cygnus is actually represented as the oldest constellation in the world within the Lascaux Cave. This announcement was made in the year 2000. And I've been in touch with him, and, he's now very familiar my independent work that I've done.
Ah.
However, what you've got to say to yourself is, you know,